9,000 years ago, RMC Haku was crawling across the ground, defeated and gasping for air. He began begging for someone in the future, the one who would inherit his mask to master it in the distant future and defeat these merciless people who showed him no compassion. Despite his tears flowing from multiple eyes back in the present, RMC Haku holds a torch as he breaks into the London Museum in the middle of the night. The museum houses an eerie collection of ancient masks. A robber wearing a red hat snaps at our boy, asking, when is the urban legend, the masked count, supposed to come out tonight? Even his crush chimes in, what kind of urban legend is the masked count? Looking through the books, Haku reveals that the masked count is a being that has been alive for ages. An ancient mask searching for a successor. The one who inherits the mask gains in human super strength, but those who can't inherit it are devoured by the mask, with mean eyes. His crush mocks him, saying, it's definitely just an urban legend. She adds, you stayed up all night for 3 days just for this nonsense. You got scammed by a YouTube video. So he apologizes to his crush, but she scoffs, saying she hates it when the big guys try to pick on him, suddenly lifting him up. The angry red hat guy says it's fake after all. As a result, Haku apologizes again, but the two bigger guys keep insulting our boy. His crush comes to the rescue, making the bigger guy nervous as she calls him out for being scared. The situation calms down as she perfectly de-escalates everything. However, Haku is disappointed in himself for not being able to defend himself. As he starts to zone out, his crush calls him back, asking when's it going to come out. He tells her that it will appear when the red moon reaches its peak. Then the mask count will appear with the ancient mask. His crush becomes more curious about the ancient mask and asks, is it this one? While pointing at various masks. One from Mayan civilization, an ancient Roman theater mask, and even a random Japanese mask. But when she points at the next mask, he gets hit with nostalgia. It's the mask with multiple eyes, the one he wore 9,000 years ago. Currently, he doesn't realize this connection. His crush praises him for being so knowledgeable just to avoid loneliness. However, she remarks that it's been ages since they started this conversation. Haku believes that it's fine. Even if he gets used, he can bear it all compared to being alone. Just being with someone in the middle of a robbery makes him really happy. Our boy probably has a screw or two loose in his head, which makes his crush sigh. Haku starts blushing while saying, I just want to be with you. But suddenly the masked count appears behind her. Haku gets alarmed and yanks her hand back, making them both fall down with a thud. The masked count starts to complete his transformation as they casually wait for it to finish. As the moon reaches its peak, the masked count rolls out his massive tongue, casually announcing, no one has the strength to wear it. As the two robbers get fired up and start mocking our boy Haku, the masked count charges at them, saying, this mask suits you. Then he forcibly puts the mask on one of them. As a result, the robber gets devoured by the mask. After this failed attempt, the count turns to the guy with the red hat, who gets turned into sand for some reason. Looking at our boy Haku and his crush, the count thinks they are the real deal, which makes him happy. He reveals he has waited a long time for this moment. The masked count gets closer, reaches forward with his pointy fingers, and grabs his crush's face right in front of him. The crush is taken aback while our boy Haku remains frozen in shock. As the count touches his crush's head, commanding wake up, blue electric sparks come out of her body. Her face turns blue and her aura causes a mini explosion, making her collapse like a sleeping puppy. She falls onto the masked count's hand. The count is about to leave. However, a hand grabs him from behind. It's our boy Haku. Noticing him, the masked count releases his aura, knocking our boy away. As he falls to the ground, he tells them to wait. But to his surprise, they have already vanished through the top of the ceiling, making our boy lose all hope. At that moment, his eyes fall into a mask beside him. Quickly, he wears it to chase after them, but it doesn't suit him. With tears falling, he tries another mask, which also results in failure. Even after multiple failures and injuries, he doesn't give up, but the pain is getting unbearable. As he crawls forward, determined to save her and never give up. Haku has a flashback of when he was alone. His crush came to save him with an umbrella. With tears flooding from his eyes, he remembers how his life changed for the better when he finally met his crush. Finally, his eyes lock onto the last mask, the one he hasn't tried yet, as he remembers all the good times he had with his crush. He crawls forward toward the mask. He finally catches it and puts it on without hesitation. Suddenly, multiple enormous red eyes stare directly at our boy, transforming him within a red aura. As he is finally able to stand, his deadly-looking transformation is complete. Haku looked upward after successfully inheriting the ancient mask. Having gained immense power meanwhile, the masked count was taking Miriam somewhere while floating on a small cloud. Feeling incredibly lucky to have encountered her without any effort. With little happy cheers, they continued flying until his joy was interrupted by someone's presence. Consequently, he turned around, wondering who it was, and discovered Haku flying behind him. The masked count let out a startled screech and began falling down, though without Miriam. Haku looked at him with fierce eyes, including one from the mask. Furthermore, taking advantage of the mask count's fall, Haku threw a smoky punch directly at him before examining his glowing hand. After seeing it, he put his other hand forward while the mask count gritted his teeth and continued falling. Subsequently, Haku started jumping in patterns to follow and attack him as his foot began turning black. The mask count flew off with Miriam, but fortunately, Haku noticed and grabbed the backpack the mask count had been carrying. Pulling the bag, Haku spun the mask count like paper and finally released Miriam. However, Haku noticed she was falling while still unconscious, prompting him to rush down desperately to save her. He raised his hand toward her and screamed in despair until he finally caught up and held her in his arms. As they were about to hit the ground, Haku fortunately used his newly gained power to propel himself. By then, his feet had become covered in golden spirals, and he sighed in relief while expressing surprise at his body's reaction. Nevertheless, the mask count returned, determined not to let Miriam escape. Purple, smoky voids with human teeth surrounded them as he declared that no matter what Haku did, he could use the masks far better. As he placed his hand forward, the smoky substance rushed toward Haku. Gritting his teeth, Haku hugged Miriam protectively, while a bright pinkish light glowed from the crumbling ground. Now that Haku was injured, the mask count clapped dust off his hands. Though Haku clearly wouldn't allow it, after a while he reached his hand out, attempting to touch the faceless mask of the mask count. Then holding his leg, he jumped toward the mask count as they ascended toward a building. Haku tried removing the mask, but it wouldn't come off. He complimented Haku, who was carrying Miriam with a frightened expression, waving at Haku. The mask count asked where he had gotten the mask and how he had mastered it. In response, Haku yelled, demanding to know what he was trying to do while carrying Miriam, exposing the masks under his outfit. The masked count began introducing himself, calling himself the Merchant of Merchants. Apparently, he had been searching for someone to inherit a special mask for a long time and still wanted to take her home. However, Haku caught his hand, causing pain, and while holding it, told him not to touch her. Haku narrowed his eyebrows at the masked count, who looked fiercely at her and declared it would be her. As it approached 12 a.m., Haku threw the masked count away with just a kick. This hurt him, but he was startled by a faint smell of something, while Haku was already starting to use his powers effectively. Feathers began falling from above, covering the masked count as well. As he wondered about this, Haku walked back carrying Miriam. Moreover, as he flew off, the masked count decided to give up, but warned that many people would come after Miriam. Suddenly, a policeman appeared at the location and bowed to another policeman who was on the phone. The officer had pink hair and a sharp canine tooth, and he was determined to catch Miriam no matter what. Suddenly, he looked up as something caught his eye and mumbled that they shouldn't think they could escape from the public security force. Meanwhile, the furious chief had ordered his fully dressed, gun-wielding team to catch someone. At the same time, Haku was floating midair while carrying Miriam, who seemed to be returning to her senses. Haku felt relieved that she was awake, though she tried to ask him something but couldn't, as her head began throbbing painfully. Haku started panicking upon seeing her in pain and assured her he would get her to a hospital. With a trembling voice, she told him not to go to the hospital or police. Furthermore, while trying to push him away, she thanked Haku for helping her. However, since she was unaware they were flying, she pushed herself into a fall, telling him to put her down. She spread her arms and closed her eyes. Subsequently, Haku shouted her name and rushed down to catch her again. Thankfully, he reached her, and their hands interlocked as he held her in a hug. They fell with a bright pink glow that eventually hit the ground. Though fortunately, they landed safely with Miriam on top of Haku on some cardboards. With a concerned look, Haku asked if she was okay, but she had already passed out again. Meanwhile, Haku wondered why she didn't want to go to the hospital, and why the masked count was after her while still holding her. His eyes showed deep concern for Miriam, until suddenly the phone in his pocket started ringing, leaving him stunned and speechless. Next, they appeared at Christ's high school building in the moonlight with chatters heard around the infirmary, while Haku watched sick Miriam lying on the bed. Someone holding a hot drink spoke up and expressed gratitude for his great help. With his mask off, Haku thanked the person for hiding the matter. The person was Yushi Cedro, the student council president of Christ High School. Handing a cup to Haku, he suggested letting Miriam rest since she didn't have major injuries. Moreover, Yushi handed him the cup again, while Haku sighed in relief. With a smile, he suggested Haku take it easy and rest for a while since the earlier call had been from him. Haku was curious why he had called so late. Yurushi looked at him with sinister eyes as Haku tried remembering if they had talked before, then turned his eyes aside. Apparently, he had received a report from townsfolk that a boy in their uniform was wandering outside. Nevertheless, tapping Haku's shoulder, Yurushi praised him for protecting Miriam, which made Haku blush and smile at the compliments because he wanted to help Miriam too. He had called the police earlier, which scared Haku since Miriam didn't want that. However, Yushi assured him it would be fine because the masked count might appear again for Miriam. Fiddling with his hot water cup, Haku hesitated about this being true. but Yushi interrupted by informing him he would wait for the police outside, leaving the rest of the place empty and quiet. Haku sat on a chair near a window holding the mask that had made him powerful enough to save Miriam previously. Reminiscing about recent events, he realized that with all those powers, he had felt like someone else back there. He wondered what the mask actually was and even considered it dangerous, though he put it in his pocket anyway. Haku sighed while looking out the window, expressing relief as he put his head against the glass pane. However, he was startled by a brown-haired policeman greeting him, "Good evening," with a creepy smile directed at him. The officer broke the glass window with a single kick, leaving Haku sitting on the floor in shock. Man cheerfully introduced himself as Elite Public Security Force and informed Haku they were there to pick him up with others waiting outside fully prepared for any circumstance. Haku became even more startled seeing so many of them at once. Though something felt wrong in his gut as he asked where the president was, the sound of shattering glass interrupted him, prompting him to turn back. The officer was carrying Miriam and ready to leave with her. Though Haku looked absolutely scared, he tried defending her as a victim, revealing they had been planning to hide her all along. Surprisingly, Haku tried stopping them because he found it all suspicious. But they kept walking away, leaving him behind. He mumbled for them to wait while trying to stand up, his eyes focused solely on Miriam as he started running toward them. The policeman stopped and turned around, then placed his ID right before Haku's face. Furthermore, he reminded Haku that he was going against a public security officer, hitting him on the chest. The policeman warned of arrest if Haku tried doing something bad, pushing him to the ground. The officer asked if he needed to repeat that. He scratched his neck and continued while still carrying Miriam on his shoulder, declaring that Haku was trying to defy the nation. Trembling with fear, Haku asked why he was taking Miriam away. The officer looked at Haku in confusion, then replied that she had been declared a criminal. With eyes widened in shock, Haku tried defending Miriam by stating she was attacked by the masked count. However, the policeman laughed mysteriously, which made Haku wonder why he was laughing. Scratching his head, the policeman admitted he thought they had hidden it well. Furthermore, he furiously grabbed Miriam laying on his shoulder and referring to her as a weapon, asked Haku if he knew anything about her. Haku's voice trembled as he questioned what weapon meant. Carrying Miriam back up, the officer replied that Haku didn't need to know. Moreover, grabbing Haku's face, he declared that from there on, it wasn't a world Haku could step into. Turning his back on Haku, the officer said he would remember Haku's face and warned him not to become a criminal too. Then they left with Miriam still lying unconscious on the officer's shoulder, while Haku sat there in despair, trying to process everything. He remembered each word the officer had said, questioning whether Miriam was truly a weapon. Subsequently, he put on the partially cut-off mask and got up slowly, stating he understood and then declaring he didn't care about anything. As the mask powers activated, he flew off right past the officer, snatching Miriam away with himself, which startled the officer, making sure to land safely. He nevertheless felt someone's presence at his back. The officer had put on an ancient mask too and was ready to attack them, demanding to know what Haku thought he was doing. Fortunately, Haku jumped and successfully dodged the attack, then landed with his feet covered in golden spiral patterns up to the knee. Sitting in the same position, he looked at the officer fiercely while the officer returned the glare. Meanwhile, other officers arrived at the scene. The officer and Haku stood far apart, facing each other, removing his mask. The officer asked why Haku was wearing one, referring to him as cannon fodder. Haku questioned who the cannon fodder was, prompting the officer to continue that the white-haired child from earlier wasn't there. The officer screamed in anger while standing beneath the bright red moon, warning Haku about hurting him before finishing it off. Haku prepared to run since there was no need to fight, so he ran while carrying Miriam. Shockingly, however, the officer appeared beside him wearing a mask and grabbed Haku by his collar from behind. Then he threw him so forcefully that the ground cracked, though Haku continued holding Miriam, trying to protect her. The officer appeared again, ready to throw another fist as he charged straight toward the ground. Fortunately, Haku successfully dodged the attack, though the masked officer's speed intrigued him. Looking at Haku, the officer claimed the mask was useless. Narrowing his eyebrows, Haku assumed it was the mask power. Standing at a corner facing the masked officer, he wanted to escape since Miriam was unconscious, and he had no option but to run. He looked at the officer ready to throw another fist. The officer looked determined to teach Haku how to deal with it. Considering him just a child who had never hit anyone, he powerfully swirled his fist in anger, while Haku worried the officer would hurt Miriam. Consequently, he took the hit on his belly while holding Miriam up so nothing would happen to her. The hit weakened him, and as Haku fell to the ground, the officer told him to stop acting cool in front of Miriam. Haku trembled, but the officer continued that they would be parting ways soon. The officer looked at Haku continuously as he refused. Haku closed his eyes calmly until suddenly 2 more eyes appeared on the mask, releasing red fumes. He sat there holding Miriam, silently deciding to fight. Even the officer became scared of the changing aura. Subsequently, Haku gently removed Miriam from his lap, and got up to fight the masked officer. His whole body was getting covered in black with golden spiral patterns as numerous birds flew by. While Haku prepared to attack, the masked officer had assumed that the mask Haku is wearing is just a replica of the original, refusing to believe that it's real. He asks why Haku is wearing it. With his overwhelming power, one of the sleeves of his uniform gets ripped. As he jumps forward for another attack, with one of his arms forward, Haku tells the officer to stop. His eyes widen along with the two others that appeared on the mask a while ago. Surprisingly, the officer's fist was as large as Haku's whole forearm, but Haku somehow still manages to shield the hit. As he throws the fist aside, the officer charges forward. However, Haku dodges it successfully again. Haku noticed that his physical abilities are enhanced when the mask opens its extra eyes. It also sharpened his senses. Something stirs inside Haku. Something strange like anger. Something like a resolve to protect Miriam. Grabbing the officer's face, Haku asks if it's the same with his mask too. He screams to make him stop, but Haku continuously pulls the mask away from the officer's face. He has successfully removed and thrown the mask. Haku pushes the officer to make him fall down. Then he destroys the mask mid-air. His fist goes through the mask, making it break in pieces. That leaves the officer with no choice but to just look at it and shout. However, refusing to let it slide, the officer jumps up to attack Haku. Haku wonders, "My girlfriend?" He remembers her as a child, saving him multiple times and anyways, smiling gently. Then he looks at the officer in anguish. "No!" Before that dash, Haku flings his foot, aiming for the officer. His kick is so powerful that it lands right on the officer's cheek, ruining his expression that makes the officer's face turn in the opposite direction. While Miriam lays behind Haku, still unconscious, the team shows concern towards the officer. For Mr. Oliver. However, Mr. Oliver seems to be laying on the ground with huge cracks around where he landed. One of the team members commands everyone to take up their arms. However, he feels the air change. Haku has arrived behind him, and he has all of the four eyes wide open. As soon as they are aware of Haku's presence, they panic. After finishing the job, Haku walks toward Miriam. Then he sits near her. He touches one of her cheeks with his hand covered in golden swirls, smiling in tiredness. Haku whispers, "Let's run away together." His warm traces trickle onto her cheeks, apologizing for it. He mutters that he'll wipe it now. Surprisingly, Miriam is back to her senses. As she's trying to get up, Haku asks if she's okay. She looks at him in confusion. She whispers his name in concern again. Then her eyes shift to the dark droplets dropping from his mouth. Looking at him in shock, she puts her hand on one of his arms. Meanwhile, the officer is sitting slightly behind where he fell before. Because Miriam is looking scared, Haku reaches for her. She trembles in fear and guilt as Haku is trying to console her that he did it. The police force arrives, mumbling that she's awake. However, one of the officers gets frozen in ice right when he is getting ready to shoot. They were ordered to capture Miriam without any deadly intent. The members salute, addressing the voice as their director. She was the student council president. Many froze in ice float and eventually freezes Haku, but she wasn't supposed to expose herself. Then she covers one of her eyes with the same icy crown shown at the beginning of the chapter. After that, she orders to capture Miriam. Miriam is shocked to hear it. Holding Miriam's face, the director congratulates her, addressing her as a child of the first generation. A guy marched forward with a veil over his face before stopping to excuse himself. It emerged that he was the reporter standing in front of a long dining table with nobody visible sitting there. He reported that a child of the first generation had awakened. The chiefs of 13 tribes had been sitting there from the beginning. The chief in the middle with the tired eye of an old person spoke up and asked if the Nids knew about it. One of them suggested burning them if they gathered together. Another chief with a yellow eye commented that they were in his tribe's territory and were resilient. The old chief in the middle side then transitioned to his real form. The little bamboo waterfall outside seemed to be working just fine. The chief took one look at it before heading out with the others. Meanwhile, a truck was on its way with the director inside. The chiefs were planning to pick them up from London while the place where Miriam was captured was shown. Haku remained frozen there, unable to move, barely able to breathe and about to freeze if this continued. He wondered if Miriam was fine as he felt cold and lonely. After a while, he started remembering his childhood when he had been bullied for not being able to make a tasty lunch. He used to be a foster child who wasn't cared for by his foster parents, and his foster siblings grinned at him judgmentally. His foster mother pulled him to a room, then locked the door while shouting that he needed to work if he wanted food. She threw Haku to the ground without mercy as his foster siblings laughed, and the mother ordered him not to leave the room for a while. The look in her eyes expressed hate, which absolutely terrified little Haku. After they left, he crawled to the door and apologized. It was raining outside. During the night, he was finally allowed to go to bed and mumbled apologies for hours afterward. Then he looked at the clock and noticed it was silent everywhere. Assuming everyone was asleep, he sneaked to the door, got his shoes laced, and prepared to leave. A chilly breeze touched him as he opened the door to find it snowing outside. He was finally outside the house, roaming around the city, sitting near a telephone booth. He reached for his pocket and took out a drawing of himself with his mother. He looked at the paper with sad eyes and remembered his long, white-haired mother, walking and turning back to look at him, with tears dropping from her eyes as she called his name. While looking at the drawing, he saw a similar figure pass by with long white hair just like his mother's. He gasped to see if she was really his mother and noticed she was holding a man's arm. He grabbed the lady's hand with a smile and hope in his eyes. He asked if she was his mother, but he frowned when she turned toward him. She wasn't his mother, and they looked at him with anger in their eyes like the eyes he didn't want to recall. The lady hit him in his belly and they left blaming him for ruining her clothes, while Haku apologized again. Little Haku dropped tears in despair, then burst out crying and apologizing as he leaned against the telephone booth. He remembered the hateful look in his foster mother's eyes, and then the same look in the lady's eyes too. He begged them not to look at him with such cold eyes and requested them not to leave him alone. Suddenly, a yellow scarf went flying toward him. As it wrapped around him, someone asked if it was cold, and if he was suffering. He looked up to see who it was and discovered little Miriam carrying an umbrella, wrapping the scarf properly around them. She declared the scarf as his and cheerfully said it would warm him up, adding that yellow suited him. As she was leaving the umbrella with him too, Haku shouted for her to wait. When she turned to him, he asked who she was, and she just smiled at him warmly, which made his tear-airy face sparkle. Back in the present, he remained stuck inside the ice with the eyes on his mask open, keeping himself reminded to stay conscious. Suddenly, he felt warm as fire surrounded him, and he opened his eyes in shock. He was stunned to see the fire melting the ice away. A man with a yellow hoodie was standing there looking at Haku. The red masked guy asked if he was warm now, while Haku looked shocked to see another masked person. The fire burned him a little, causing him to scream as the red masked guy apologized for it. Then Haku asked who he was. Putting on his glasses, the man declared that this handsome man's name was Choen, while smiling beneath the red moon. Furthermore, he kept the rest of the information secret because mysterious men were more popular. Cho asked Haku about the girl with the yellow bandana, who happened to be Miriam, grabbing his bird mask. Haku jumped away, then involuntarily put the mask on. He charged toward the guy, asking why everyone was after her. However, Cho misunderstood that Haku was after her too. Taking a sip of a packet of fruit juice, he explained it was just that. Though Haku threw himself with a punch at his belly, Cho effortlessly caught his hand and threw Haku, who fell on the ground on his back. It seemed useless to attack Cho because he was powerful even without the mask. Sitting on Haku's belly, Cho asked if he was her friend. Gritting his teeth, Haku replied that it was none of his business, while Cho looked at him calmly. Getting up, he concluded that Haku was in love with her. Looking around, Cho assumed she had been kidnapped, as Haku removed his mask, mumbling that they were looking for the same thing overall. So he asked Haku to be friends with him. Haku was delighted to know that someone wanted to be his friend, but he shook his head, refusing to be tempted by sweet words. He couldn't differentiate between friend and enemy anymore because of how the student council president had betrayed him. He turned to the other side, declining the handshake offered by Cho. Haku thanked him for helping, then continued that if he was after her. But suddenly the police force appeared. Haku became anxious seeing them again. Cho smiled brightly, declaring that Haku was a criminal too. The word too in his phrase suggested that Cho was also a criminal. Tapping his shoulder, Cho proposed to Haku that they search for Miriam together since they had the same enemy, the police force. He asked Haku what he would do. Haku looked at him in surprise because Cho didn't look at him with those cold eyes. The commander commanded his team to get their guns out, while Haku surprisingly looked calm. That was his approval, which was all Cho needed to form an alliance with him, and he was now going to teach Haku how to use a mask. The cops started firing toward them. So in defense, Cho used Crown Ani. The fire spread everywhere with such intensity that it was even melting the bullets. Droplets of hot iron dropped near Cho as fire swirled around him fiercely. Haku was stunned to see the bullets melting. Cho asked if Haku only used the mask for boosting physical abilities. And as he was going to show Haku the next step, the police officers addressed him as Gabri. Cho released fire from his mouth, with his mask completely transformed as he blew it facing upward. He miraculously made a stick that appeared with fire, and he commanded to awaken the power. He threw it toward the running cops, then got another one ready. A tornado of fire was made, blowing all the policemen away before he moved the fire tornado away from them. Haku covered his head to defend himself, then looked up to Cho. He was standing tall below the bright red moon, as Cho decided to teach Haku how to chase his girl. Haku's eyes widened as he declared that Cho's power was limitless. Then he looked at his mask and a strange voice muttered that he was just getting started. That's it for this chapter. Smash that like, sub for more, and let me know your favorite moment in the comments.